All right. Well, while people are coming in, we're going to get rolling. Good evening and welcome to Thursday Night live here from the great state of New Hampshire and California and Ohio and North Carolina. My name is Brennan Barnard. I am the Director of College Counseling at the Derryfield School in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the College Admission Program Advisor at the Making Caring Common Project at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we are brought to you tonight by the Derryfield School and also by the Character Collaborative, who've been kind enough to sponsor this event. And I will get to our wonderful panelists in a second. What I want to start by saying is just that this evening kind of hinges on audience participation. So please use the chat function to type in your questions. And we're going to ask a number of kind of initial questions, and then we'll launch into questions from participants. So feel free to put those in the chat. And this is being recorded and will be sent out in the next day afterwards to all those that are registered. So with that said, welcome. I'm going to go down here alphabetically and introduce our wonderful panelists. First, we have Gary Clark, and Gary is the Director of Undergraduate Admission at UCLA. He has served in the college admission profession for 22 years, beginning his career at Christopher Newport University and the College of William and Mary, before moving to California in 1999. He then served in the admission office at Pitzer College in Claremont, California, before joining the admission staff at the University of Southern California, and now Director of Undergraduate Admission at UCLA. And he has an amazing site behind him, which is not UCLA.
Not my campus. Not my campus.
Welcome.
Truth in advertising. Not my yard either.
And next we have Chris Gruber. Chris is the Vice President and Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina. And he's held that position since 2005. Prior to that, Chris was the Director of Admission at the University of Richmond in Virginia. He has served as a reader for the National Merit Scholarship Program and is currently the Executive Director for a group of admission deans from 19 private colleges and universities throughout the southeastern United States. And Chris was also the president of the Common App during his 5-year tenure on the board of directors, and currently serves on the board of directors for the Coalition for Access, Affordability, and Success. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Dr. Beth Weiser, and Beth came to the Ohio State University in November of 2019 from Carnegie Mellon University, where she was most recently the Director of Visitor Experience. And previous to that, Beth was the Executive Director of Admissions for the University of Vermont. And before that, served as the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions and first-year experience at Ohio State. So you've come full circle. Beth has served in a variety of roles at Capital University, Denison University, and Ohio Wesleyan University. And she has served the admissions profession as chair of the ACT Statewide Assembly and was an executive board member of both the Ohio and New England Associations for College Admission Counseling. So welcome, Beth, and thank you all for being here. Their questions are already filling up in the chat, but I do want to begin with the one question we've been asking every panelist. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th webinar we've done in this series. And as many of you know, Rick Clark, the Director of Admission at Georgia Tech, and I wrote the book, The Truth About College Admission, which is a guide for families going through this. And in that process, we talked to a number of admission deans about kind of what are the lasting truths about college admissions. How do you cut through the hype and the noise around college admission. So I'd love to start there, and maybe Gary, we'll start with you and just share one truth about college admission.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on this panel, and look forward to answering all the questions that folks have tonight. I think for me, the one truth is, in spite of all the stress, in spite of the being inundated with information and, experts or people who claim to be experts, I think the one truth I would ask that you remember is that you're going to land at a great institution, and it's going to be the right institution for you. And maybe that's a highly selective university, maybe it's not, maybe it's a community college, maybe your path is going to take a lot of different turns along the way. But you're going to end up at an institution that gives you everything you need. And I think oftentimes people lose sight of, in the college search, they picture that diploma hanging on the wall behind them, with the name and script of the institution that they attend. And I think that's where the focus of this search tends to be, but they forget about the name in the middle, which is the name of the student, and the role that they play in making any college experience a great college experience. So I would say, as you enter into this search, know that regardless of how selective a school is or how well it's known to your neighbors and people like that, you're going to work with your counselors, you're going to find a place that's a really good fit for you, and you're going to go to college and have a great experience. So don't let the stress and anxiety of everything that goes into college admission deter you from knowing that, you're going to be moving on to the next really incredible chapter of your life. So try and take a breath and enjoy the process, heaven forbid.
That's a great point. Thank you, Gary. Beth, what do you think? One truth about college admission.
Thanks, Brendan, for engaging us in this conversation. And it's just so important to be able to have this sort of dialogue. And I really give you a lot of credit for being able to reach so many people and get so many different perspectives about this. So when I think about the truths, I'm going to really build off of what Gary just said. And this concept of perfect college, that you have to go out and search for the one perfect place. And the truth in the admissions process is there's not one perfect place for you. There's actually probably several perfect places. And the process itself is just that, the sense of the most uncomfortable part is the self-evaluation and the reflection about what I want and what is right for me. And what you believe to be true about that at the beginning and where you're going to land in that at the end is probably going to be very different. I talk to students all the time and say, who you were as a 10th grader and who you are at the end of your junior year is two very different people. And that's the same with the college search process. So be open to the fact that you could fall in love with several different places. And that really actually is a good sign of a college search, is at the end that you're going to be left with choices, and choices where you'll feel really good about any of those options that you choose. So don't think you have to go find one perfect place, but find several.
That's a great point. Mr. Gruber, what do you think? Bring us home.
All right, I'll bring you home. In 2 months, this will have been 35 years of doing this. And I think one of the things that I am grateful for is the fact that the people that are working to advocate for students, I find is some of the best people that I've ever had the privilege to work with, whether they're on the college side, the secondary school side, whether they're working at community-based organizations, and they're looking to advocate for students to make proper match. And that is a truth that I think holds true and always has. We're looking for proper match for our places. That's what makes all of our different colleges and universities distinctive, but we're looking for ways to find students doing things right. That doesn't mean we can meet everybody, but I do believe that of the wonderful folks that I've had the good fortune to work with over all the years, plus families, students, I will tell you, one of the things that keeps you coming back is the fact that people want to do this the right way and serve as strong advocates. So for that, I'm grateful.
That's such a great point. And I think it sometimes can, this process can get focused so much on this idea of exclusion, and it can be, and I think is for all of us, one of real connection, and hopefully will be for students too. So that's a great point. Thanks, Chris. So the other question before we jump into these growing number of questions in the chat, just briefly, I'd love to hear, maybe Beth, maybe we'll start with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the role of character in college admission.
Yeah, absolutely. Ohio State is the 6th institution where I've worked, and I attended a different one for my undergraduate. And this idea about what our mission is to be able to educate people, make a difference for others. And it's always really focused around the people. And you can imagine it a place like Ohio State with 53,000 undergraduates from very diverse backgrounds. This idea of making sure that we don't want to build a community just based on students' academic abilities, but how will they be able to come together and contribute in really responsible as well as impactful ways. And so we need to be able to pay attention, and we do very carefully pay attention to things like the students' resilience and their citizenship in school, and how they're showing care and compassion for others, because that's what marks our alumni. That's what they choose to do in their professions. And so we want a community of those people, and the admissions process gives us clues around that.
That's great. Chris, do you want to take that next?
Sure. Yeah. Does character count? You bet it does. You bet it does. What is the phrase that well dates me? I never let my schooling get in the way of my education. And I think what we're really referring to with that is going to be, who are you surrounded by? And who you're surrounded by, I think, is very, very important. So to be surrounded by people that are going to help you grow, that are going to challenge you, that are going to appreciate the differences that you bring and learn from that, I think character counts in a big way. Everything we do at Davidson is guided by a mission statement that is stating we're looking to help students develop humane instincts for leading lives of leadership and service. And I think one of the underlying fibers that goes with that is the character of the people that we want. So it absolutely counts in a holistic review process.
That's great. Thanks. All right, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would echo what Beth and Chris just shared. I think character does matter, but I will say it with this caveat. When we're talking about college admission and we're talking about the things that matter in college admission, I think people inevitably get in this frame of mind of, okay, how do I check that box? Like, what is the thing I need to do to show that I have character? And that's not what we're saying here. I think what we're talking about is, to me, I want a student in the application more than anything else to be authentic, to be your authentic, true self, to demonstrate to us the things you care about, the things you're committed to, your academic interests, how you think, the things you commit your time towards. Your character will come through in those things. It's not about, well, if, you're involved in service if you have character, right? Like, if I don't see any service, you must not have character. Like, it's not about checking boxes and being able to indicate that a student has this or they don't. It's about a student presenting themselves in that true, genuine, authentic way. And through the different things that we look at in the application, whether it's, essays or personal insight questions, involvement, curriculum, those kinds of things, that will help us to define that and see how that character and that student quality really fits in with the kind of community that we have on our campus.
That's great, thanks. And that was one of the questions in the panel, in the chat there, was kind of, are there ways to judge one's character other than the essay? And I think you kind of touched on it there in those different ways, the ways they're involved and potentially in recommendations and pieces like that. Let's kind of, a related question is this one, how can a student strike the right balance between talking about their accomplishments in depth while also not seeming self-promoting or overeager? And that's a great question. I mean, a lot of times I have to, when I sit down with students, I have to pull it out of them, right? It's been so ingrained that, you don't brag, you don't talk about yourself, but this experience of applying to college is one where you really need to be proud of the things you've done and find ways to communicate that. So how do you strike that balance? How do you see people do that well? Does any of you want to take that one specific? Chris, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, there is a balance. So I think your question is well stated, and the fact that there's somewhere like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. Oh, you were the president of the Student Government Association. You just wrote down that you were involved in SGA. So we want students to be honest and forthright. And I want you to speak of the accomplishments and changes that you have made. What is it that you are proud of? I ask that you be concise. But I also would say don't embellish beyond what truly happened. So I want you to be forthright. I want you to tell us, I want you to give us any of the nuances that might exist with that. But I would say go on a words diet as you do it, because I want to get through everything. If there's something you're especially proud of, share it. But chances are you're not going to have that same need to talk about everything in that exact same way.
Great.
And this is Brendan. I would add, this is a really great time to use school counselors or a teacher who knows you well to reflect back what you think you're going to say about yourself, because others are going to be, who know you well, are going to be a really good judge of that, who are, professional educators. And so use your teachers and counselors to help you.
Thanks for the shout out.
I think if I can, Brennan, I want to add one quick thing to that. I think students, when one of the things to keep in mind for my institution and other institutions like us, we don't collect letters of recommendation. So there is no safety net here of, if you don't mention it, we won't know, period. So I think students really need to think about what they want and need to share, because we're not going to get that from any other source if we don't hear it from the student. And I would also encourage students to think more broadly. Don't think about, what you're doing outside of class as specifically having to be clubs or athletics or things connected to school. And I think especially in times like this, what do you do? You might be doing things to support your family at home. You might be working part-time. You might be, there might be things that aren't really school related that you're doing with your time that really reflect on kind of your character and commitment and dedication and these type of things. So I would encourage students to really think with a broad lens when they think about what they want to share.
That's a great point. And so a related question, and I think some of the questions tonight will kind of center around COVID-19 and our current situation, but some hopefully will be kind of broader. And one of them is kind of, what role will essays play? Will they be more important this year? And as you may know, as I think you all know, but as participants might know, Common App has recently added a question, an optional question on their application for students this year, and also in counselor recommendations, to allow students the opportunity to talk specifically about the impact that COVID-19 or any kind of other significant disaster, things like that, have had on their schooling or their lives. And so that provides an opportunity for them not to have to use the college essay to, their personal statement to do that. But what will essays be, as testing is not available this year as much, and other things, will essays play a bigger part, do you think? Chris, you want to touch on that one?
Yes, if we are looking at the number of tools that we've had in the toolbox, and if one of them is no longer there, I do think that all the other things are going to matter more. I do think that what a large number of schools are going to be looking at first is putting greater emphasis on grades earned, the challenge of coursework. That first and foremost is going to be at the center of what we're looking at. But I do think that these statements are going to give us something more, and there's going to be a greater need to be looking at this to understand who is this person that is going to be coming. I think students are going to be coming out of all of this. And it's interesting as we're surveying our own students right now to make sure that they are well, their appreciation for community has never been so strong. And, you know, I've taken for granted what I have, and now that I don't have it, boy, do I miss it. So I do think that students are going to really be looking to understand, because in each of the prompts, independent of what application they are using, the prompt is really getting at you and what can we learn about the student. And that's, I think, going to be critical as we're moving forward and shaping communities. So I do see that there's going to be greater value falling on these written statements.
Great point. Is there, so another question here in the chat is this question about, is there any conversation around reducing the number of spaces for extracurriculars and applications? Kids think that they need to list 10 things in the Common App and 20 in the UC app. And there's, you know, this idea of kind of resume padding and that kind of thing. Maybe Gary, I don't know, do you want to touch on that? Is there conversation around that? Are there messages you can send to students around the need or lack of need to fill those spots?
Yeah, I mean, it's more the latter. I mean, I think we did make a change in the past couple of years to our application related to the number of fields that students have to fill out. And I think what we're trying to emphasize with students is, and I say this all the time, that it's not the length of the resume that matters to us. It's the depth of commitment to the things that you do that really stands out. You know, we're not looking for students that you know, I would say this, I've worked at some big institutions and some small, but, you know, with an incoming freshman class, for example, of probably 6,300 students, you know, this idea that every student is a well-rounded student, no, it's a well-rounded class of individuals, but it's not every individual in that class being well-rounded. You know, I think students present themselves and their strengths in a lot of different ways. Some students are active and engaged in lots of things because they love that, and that's what gets them excited, and they enjoy kind of being engaged in these different things. Other students may be really focused on one or two things that they're passionate about, and they pour themselves into that, and they take on responsibility and leadership, and that really shines through in the application as well. There's a place on college campuses for both of those students. You know, so I think students should spend less time thinking about how to fill every box and really just be conscious of how they spend their time, and that it's things that they really care about. Because I think, you know, we talk about this word authenticity, and when we read an application, like, it comes through. Like we see when you're engaged, when we can tell when you're really passionate about something that you're active in, versus, you know, just adding things to you know, to an application because you think it impresses us. So I would say, you know, focus on quality over quantity for sure.
That's great. Is there any conversation around limiting those? I mean, I know like MIT limits the number of activities students can report to 4, just for that exact reason, just so to try to emphasize that. Any conversations happening around that? Chris, I saw you unmuted.
We have not, you know, had that. But we're also seeing students that have put down 1. And, you know, I think the example that Gary gave before of, you know, a student goes home and they are the principal caretaker of younger siblings, and they are a tutor, they are a playmate, they are the cook, they are the housekeeper, they are, you know, they're doing everything. You know, is there any more powerful experience that one could have? Yeah, so we are not, you know, we're looking for that authentic element. And I think what it also comes to as well is, you know, Gary's alluded to this thought of, I believe we have to check boxes. You know, we need to have 2 parts sports, and we need to have 1 part of, or 3 parts of service. and we need to have founded our own nonprofit, and we need to have done all these different things to check the box. I think what that often leads to, and that's not what we're looking for. What we want to see is what's important to you. I don't want you doing anything for the transactional value of what you feel it's going to yield you in our process.
Right.
But no limit to your original
also,
question. I digress.
Right. Well, but it's also really important for those students who are doing those things, are taking care of a younger sibling, or are working a almost full-time job to support the family, or those things. It is important. Often students see those as just kind of, this is in my DNA. This is what I do. This isn't something I should report because this is me, right? And the Common App, for example, has it's one of the activities you can list is family responsibilities, right? And so I think we just need to remind students to make sure that they communicate some of those things, because it is an important part of what they do and who they are and what they bring to a campus.
Brennan, we'd also just add that we know that a lot of students have missed out on the chance to do some of these things as well. So there were likely boxes that they would have been filling in, and now they're not having the opportunity. So Beth, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Beth, did you want to add on?
Exactly what I was going to say is that we're very fully aware that there will be maybe some incompleteness for students that they wish they had. And that's the part about the professionals that Chris was talking about, that we care about that, and we're fully aware that maybe a student's set of activities is going to look very different in this next cycle.
And Beth, while you're there, can I just ask you to address this question that somebody had back to the essay question and the COVID-19 question, kind of on the new question, the optional question. Are colleges going to, if a student doesn't answer that question, is it going to make you scratch your head? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear you say it.
No.
Okay.
We want students to be sure that they feel comfortable. For some people, there might be some things that they don't want to share in the process, and we want to respect people's individual personal situations in that, but don't feel the pressure to have to answer anything. It really helps us if just there's some additional context that would be helpful that can be part of the application. But we are fully aware of the general impact. We want to know if there are things that are different for you specifically in that process.
That's great. And, another question that came up here in the chat is this idea of, since we're talking kind of about extracurricular activities, this idea that, so much has been canceled, and is opportunities, summer opportunities and internships and just clubs and activities. Is there an expectation that students will be doing those online and finding ways to be involved? I think your heads are all answering the question. Gary, do you want to just elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, and I mean this sincerely, and I'm pretty sure that Beth and Chris will concur with this. This is not the time to be strategic. This is the time to really focus on self-care. Like, take care of yourself, focus on doing well in school. Take care of your family. We are in a real challenging situation, and this is for the students, for parents, for counselors, for faculty. We're all in pretty uncharted waters here. And I think every college and university admission office is going to recognize that this period of time is a time when students really need to just focus on being in this new, virtual learning environment that nobody expected they would be in 2 months ago. And really navigate that successfully. What we're not looking for is for students who find that secret window into that internship that nobody else could find. Like, I think we recognize that this is a period, and I don't know how long this period will extend. I don't think any of us do, that you simply do not have access to do the things that a student might typically want or be able to do right now. And so, of course, everybody's going to be in that position. Any student or counselor or anybody who works with students listening, like, everybody's in the same boat right now. And I think we really want students to focus where they can on doing well academically in their courses, taking care of themselves physically, mentally. Get yourself in a good place. Now is actually, if you want to do something productive right now, do some online virtual college searches. It's a great time to do that. Can't visit in person, but I can promise you the virtual engagement opportunities at colleges and universities now versus even 8 weeks ago are vastly different. So take advantage of that time now to engage in your college search in a deep and meaningful way. Follow social media, try and call campuses and talk to students if you can. Like, we've got lots of opportunities like that, but don't worry about what you can't do right now, because we recognize that students across the country have had almost all of the opportunities to engage outside of class taken away from them now.
And maybe we can just, because this question, oh, go ahead, Beth.
I was going to say, I think about all the things that my kids didn't have time to do in high school because they were busy with their extracurricular activities. Now, I tell students, read a book, read as much as you can right now, because you don't get a chance to do that as much for leisure, and explore all those books that you didn't have a chance to take advantage of, because just that exercise of getting lost in a book is so therapeutic, and will actually be one of the best college prep things you can do right now.
Or go for a walk with your mother, right? I have a high school age son, and we went for a walk today and had a great talk about stuff that we probably wouldn't have talked about if we were just kind of running from thing to thing. And so yeah, these are real opportunities. Can we just go around really quickly, and because I know this question's coming up a bunch of times, and I think I know the answer, but can you just really quickly address the question of where kind of plans are in terms of what the fall will look like at your schools, and also if there's any plan to offer small group tours or something like that if your state's open back up and there's some freedom around that. Is there kind of, where are you with that? Just really quickly. Chris, do you want to start?
So we are starting to open. We are moving into what is called a phase 2. We don't envision ourselves opening way to the end of this to probably well into phase 3. And we're not going to be opening up an admission office until other parts of the college are open. So all of our opportunities at present are by way of remote. We've decided that we are not going to use the word virtual anymore. That's a word we're already sick of. So we're going to do remote programs being offered for tours, for information sessions. So that's what we're doing as of right now. I would hope that we're going to probably get into the middle of July, the end of July. I'd love to see something a little bit different at that point, and it will be small scale at the start, obviously, in order to protect those that are visiting and those that are on site.
So stay tuned. Yeah. Beth?
Yeah, it's always stay tuned right now.
Everything is fluid week by week, but as of today, all of Ohio State's classes for the summer are being offered online. And we currently are not hosting visitors on our campus this summer. And the university is making decisions about what the instruction will be for the fall, and we hope by mid-June we will have a clear picture of what that offering will be in the fall. And that's going to really drive what we will be able to do in terms of visitors. I think regardless of whether campuses are open or not, I'm trying to give the advice to say, just because visits are being offered in September or October, perhaps they're not going to look like the campus that perhaps students will be attending in 2021 and beyond. So I wouldn't necessarily take the time to rush out, because unless there's different information that I'm not receiving, that there will still be lots of restrictions, even if campus programs or visits are allowed. So I think in order to get the clearest picture of what the university will offer, stay home and take advantage of all of the virtual things that Gary talked about, because that's where we're investing all of our time to have engagement. I think right now students are actually in a better place to have more engagement with admissions offices now, because that's all we're able to do. And so our staff is on the phone much more, answering emails and things like that, because we're not traveling anywhere. We're not doing programs and that take us away from that other core work. So take advantage of being able to engage.
Yeah, I met with my whole junior class today, and that was one of my suggestions. And one of the questions also in the panel was, in the chat, was that how do you do a remote tour? And they just can go to your admission website, and there are links to those virtual events and things like that. But I was saying to my juniors, as you search for schools, pick a day or two a week, whether it's an hour or whatever, and just and make it part of your routine of going and visiting some schools. And if you do 2 a week, choose one that of a school that you're really interested in and you've been thinking about for a long time, and go and do their tour. And then the other day, do a school that you've never heard of. You find on a college search or something like that, one that's just kind of totally off your radar, and just see what stands out to you, and who knows what you'll find. So Gary, do you want to just touch on UCLA's plans at least?
Yeah, so very similar to what Beth shared. Our virtually everything in the summer is fully online. All of our summer courses are online. Our orientation program this summer is online. We haven't announced plans for fall in terms of how courses will be delivered, whether that's some combination of in-person and virtual, or more more closer to virtually exclusive. The campus is still figuring all that out. We need to figure out housing as well. I think we were a campus that had a 3-year housing guarantee for incoming freshmen, and 99% of our freshmen lived on campus. And in the case of the past, probably 3 or 4 years, close to 80% of those students were in triples. That's not happening anymore. So I think the campus has to, based on kind of CDC guidelines and evolving safety protocols, in the state and nationally, we're going to have to decide how much capacity do we have to adhere to those kind of safety guidelines, and then how many beds does that mean we have to offer to students to potentially live on campus in the fall. So, I absolutely understand why it is the most common question that we keep getting, and I think some people think colleges are being evasive with these answers, and they're not. There's just, think about what the world around us looked like 8 weeks ago versus what it looks like now. What's it going to look like in 4 weeks? What's it going to look like in 8 or 12 weeks from now? I don't know of anybody who can really say that with any certainty quite yet. So we're working to get those clear answers out to our students and counselors and communities as quickly as we can. But there are a lot of ripple effects of those decisions that all colleges and universities are considering before they make the safe and wise choice for their community.
When you do figure it out, when you do anticipate what's going to happen in a month, will you send that memo my way?
I'll send it to you first for sure.
Yeah. So this is a good question that just came in. Why do you think there's such a disconnect between what admission directors are saying about what they value and look for and how students should present themselves versus what students and parents think they need to do and present in terms of leadership and all this kind of stuff? Where's that feedback loop that the students and parents are receiving those messages that reinforce that? What's the disconnect there? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Gary, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'll start, because this one, I think part of, when you talk about a feedback loop, it has a lot to do with who you're getting feedback from. I think, the gospel according to the neighbor is a dangerous thing. And I think what often happens in college searches is people talk, and a student applies to a college or university and they don't get admitted. And the family next to them somehow thinks they know something about that student. Well, I know that student had, a 1380, and they applied to biology at UCLA, and they didn't get admitted. Therefore, if you have less than a 1400 and you apply to biology, you don't have a chance, or so-and-so got admitted and he had this list of activities and this person had this and didn't. And you tend to take those things and then begin to reverse engineer the reasons behind those decisions. When we're making decisions on an application, we have a whole breadth of information that we're looking at. And students stand out in different ways in an application, and especially when you get into highly selective institutions. The students that we say no to often don't look drastically different than the students we say yes to. And that's because of the self-selective nature of an applicant pool. If I give you 100 applications and tell you to look at them and tell me you say these 50 are incredible. These are exactly the kind of students that you want at your institution. They're engaged, good grades, strong curriculum, all the things. And then I come back and say, okay, now choose 5 of those, or 10 or 15. It's not like the other students didn't do anything compelling. You read them and said they were incredible, but you can only choose 5, 10, or 15. And so we can often do a lot to really talk about and defend the students that we admit, but man, is it tough to convince those students who don't get good news from us what more they could have done. Because when you're in that kind of rare air of competitiveness, even when you do all the right things, you still may not get the admission offer because you're competing against almost exclusively, in some cases, other students who've also done all those same right things. So I think that's why, going back to our point earlier, like, do what you love, do what you care about, do what you're passionate about, focus on doing well academically, and let the chips fall where they may. Because if you do all these things that you think colleges want to see and it doesn't work out, then you're going to look back and say, well, then why did I do all these things?
Right.
Why did I engage all these things? Well, if you just did it for the college going part, then you're really going to be missing out on the things you might spend your time on that you really care deeply about.
And I want to add too, Gary, that was a great explanation. And there are a couple of things that I always remind students that are not necessarily in their control in any given year. And one of those is who else applies in that particular year. And the second is, what are the university goals for that particular year? And that could be, size, it could be academic programs, it could be that, engineering gets larger or smaller in any given year. And so all of those things go into students being admitted. And so from one year to the next, students with the exact same credentials, exact same portfolio, might get a different admission decision. And I think that's the most challenging, one of the most challenging things for students to try to get, because it's this sense of, I should be able to do something to be able to control that. And it's like, there's control on the part of where you apply and then where you choose. And this is the piece that, unfortunately, with very good students and students we would love to have on our campuses, we may have to say no.
Well, and how should they, how should students and families get at some of those priorities? I mean, should they expect transparency from schools around some of those priorities, around certain majors or certain institutional priorities that they have? Um, you know, whether it's you know, focusing on first generation college students, or whether they're focusing on students from certain geographic areas. Is that information they should expect?
I think you're going to hear some of those things as colleges and universities are talking. If a school were to say to you, we have partnered with QuestBridge, if a college or university is saying that we have done work with Posse, if they are quoting the fact that here's a percentage of first generation students, they're talking about some of their priorities. If you're visiting a Division I school, there's a statement there that athletics is a priority to them. If there's any new programs that are academic that have just been brought on, and they talk about a brand new art major and program that they are looking to build, chances are they're going to be looking to bring in more artists and art historians to a program such as that. So I think you can ask about some of those, but I think what people are often trying to do with this is decode to say, what is it that I should do? Should I be giving my child the bassoon in the early part of their junior year so they can be proficient with it? Because most colleges are looking for a bassoonist for the orchestra. That, don't try to re-engineer this process by trying to say, what is it that we're looking for?
Right. Comes back to that authenticity piece. Tons of questions. I'm trying to get to some of them here. Can we? This has been a kind of ongoing question. I know it's a question for a lot of you, but this issue of the potential for students to take gap years, and are you? Where are you with that? And is that going? Do you anticipate the this year's the high school graduating class of 2020 and their decision about college, is that going to have a huge effect on this year's juniors, the class of 2021, as they look to college? Any thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, we've already asked for students that are first year students that are looking to defer to express that interest to us by May 1. Do I think there's going to be a different set of questions that are coming about when colleges and universities talk about the type of education they're going to be delivering this upcoming fall? Yes. And I think for returning students, for new students, there are going to be different questions. I think there are a couple of options. If the number of deferrals happens to be small, perhaps some colleges and universities would offer them. If the number of deferrals gets to be large, the question or the answer could be, you're going to need to then reapply for next year, because the fact that my capacity for next year's class, the class of 2025, I can't have a third of my class of 2024 now joining the class of 2025 and passing that all the way through the system over the next 4 years. So I do think that depending on what schools elect to do, that is going to be part of the rationale that or part of the answers that they are giving at that point as to what is the process that they are going to allow students to follow in going forward at that school.
That's great. That any other thoughts, Beth or Gary? Is that pretty much covered? Okay. Okay. And then one last question, and then we'll do kind of a wrap-up question. And this is just again on the testing piece, because I know that's on a lot of people's minds. What role will testing, even for schools that have gone test optional, what role will testing play this year? And should students still think of taking those? I mean, these are the questions we're getting again and again. Gary?
I can start, sure. So yeah, the University of California came out and said that we're going to be test optional for the fall 2021 admission cycle in light of kind of the limitation and lack of access to testing that students have currently, with some of the recent administrations being canceled and some of the challenges that might be posed by the change in format and offering of those exams going forward. So optional is optional. And I've seen a couple of the questions come through here that, optional truly means optional. And I used to work at an institution that went test optional. And I think every college and university that approaches admission in that way, has to train their staff to not be biased against students who choose not to submit the exam. If you have taken the exam and you feel like you've done well and you want those scores to be looked at, then absolutely feel free to consider them. Don't ask me what score that is, like in terms of I took it and I got this, because it's all in context. We post the middle 50% of our SAT and ACT scores each year because we want everybody in the world to see this is the middle 50%. 25% of the students that we admitted had below that bottom number and 25% had above that top number. So when you're evaluating whether or not you choose to submit standardized testing, it's completely up to you and something you should talk to your counselor about when making that decision. I think that the advice I would give to students is, I would generally encourage students to prepare for and take the exam. And after they see their scores, then make a decision about whether or not they want to submit those scores. That allows you to make an informed decision about, okay, here I took it, here's how I performed. Let me make this decision about whether I think that is a score that's going to support my candidacy in the admission process. But understand that for us, if a student does not submit standardized test scores, then we're just going to look at everything else that's presented in the application and make a decision based on that information. We will absolutely in no way, shape, or form penalize a student for not submitting those exams. But here we go back to that reverse engineering point. You wait, and next year, the second that somebody doesn't submit a score and isn't admitted to a test optional school, there's your reason. Because I didn't submit my scores, that's why I'm not getting in.
Right.
So, test optional is exactly that. It's test optional. We'll evaluate everything else that's submitted by the student in the application if test scores are not provided.
That's great. Thanks. All right, we're getting close to the end here, and so we're going to go to the lightning round. We're going to come back to kind of pull it back out of the weeds a little, and I would love to hear from each of you, and maybe we'll start with Beth, and then we'll go Gary, and then Chris. And you can take this question whichever way you want, but what would you do differently if you were going to do your college search over? Or what would you tell, your own child to do differently, or tell juniors to do differently? So just kind of you go with it the way you want to go with it.
Yeah, I have a couple of different thoughts about that. I mean, first of all, I continue to tell students, find the right balance. You've heard this a lot tonight, finding that right balance of enjoying high school. We often say that we don't want to have students run out of gas by the time they get to us in college because they've tried to do so much to prepare for the college admissions process. To be able just to focus on the things that you love to do in high school. And then I have a little story that actually is about my son's college search. And this is illustrative of the role of the parent. And here I am, like, doing this for a living. Went on college tours with him, and there was one place where we went where I did not connect with the tour guide whatsoever. And he was like, yeah, it was okay, and it was fine, and all that. Well, that was this college that he ended up choosing, and he had an amazing experience there. And had I been that parent that would have said, oh, that's not the place you want to go. And so it's advice for myself as a parent to be able to talk about stepping back a little bit and letting the student step forward And his instincts were exactly right.
Great point. Great. Thank you. Gary?
I mean, the big, it's a while back, but the big difference in my search, I would say is, I went to a college that was about 30 minutes away from where I grew up. I was first person in my family to earn a college degree, and I went to the place that was close by because it made sense for lots of reasons. I didn't even consider private colleges and universities because I took that tuition, I multiplied it by 4 and said, there's no way that my family can afford this, and there's no way that I want to graduate with that kind of debt. And so I really limited my search in a way that I probably didn't need to. Now, I still had a great experience and went to a place that was perfect for me as an undergraduate. But I guess I would just encourage students to really think broadly, to not limit themselves out of the gate in terms of the places that they might consider. And as someone who attended a place that isn't necessarily that well known outside of the Commonwealth of Virginia, don't think that the name of the institution plays an overly critical role in your success in life. I'm doing all the things I want to do, and I'd like to think I have a little bit to do with that, because of what I took out of the experience while I was there. So I guess I would just go back to my point of keep your options open and know that there are going to be a lot of good fits out there for students, not just one.
That's great. Thanks, Gary.
I think that most often, and I would change this about myself, and my youngest daughter is just finishing her freshman year in college right now, and she actually did this. And it was focus first on the things that you want to find in the 4 years of your collegiate experience. What are the attributes of place that you most want, and who do you want to be surrounded by? So start with the personal needs that you want to find. Is it program? Is it the participation in a sport? Is it to be in a different part of the country or world for a period of time? What are those things you want? And from there, then you start to build the list of colleges and universities. And I think that most oftentimes students start to build the list of schools first, and then hope that they're going to have all those things that they truly want. And they haven't done that self-examination of what do I want? What's going to allow me to thrive over the next 4 years? What has brought me great success up until this time? Is it small classrooms? Is it accountable faculty members? Have I been in a smaller place where I've had the chance to be involved and to make a difference? And do I want to find that going forward? I wish I had done that. So I'm thrilled that I got to witness that, at least with my youngest, when she did it. So list of needs first.
That's great. Thanks. And students are in kind of a unique time right now when they really have an opportunity as they're staying at home and as they're not in their school communities, high school students, to think about what are the things they're missing from that experience, and who are the people they're missing, and how does that translate to what they might want in college, and what don't they miss, right? And what can they do without, and to use that to really inform their search. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to look at these beautiful backgrounds and dream of a different time and different place. Have a wonderful evening. And we will be back here again next week. So please join us. And we will be sending this recording out. And may you all be well and stay well. Thanks.